All right, for today's lesson, we're going to be talking about histograms, but we're going to talk about a few other formats, a line plot, which I like to call a dot plot, and a frequency table that can lead up to a histogram. And then we're going to talk about how to analyze. So, a line plot. You have probably seen a line plot in some of our examples. It shows every data point in your problem. So, it shows every data point. Now, frequency means how many times something occurs. So, the frequency of a value, so the frequency of a number, is shown by the number of dots or other symbols. They can use X's. Sometimes they'll use little other symbols to represent if they're trying to make the graph cutesy. But some type of symbol is going to represent how many numbers are in that value. All right, so given an example of this, so the first thing when you do a frequency table, if it's a real world example, of course we're going to put a title and we're going to use a number line. So when I look at my value, so I range anywhere from 1 to 16. So I'm going to count by twos in order to save some space here. So we're going to start with 0, 2, 4, and I'm going to keep going up until I get to 16. All right, so I have my table, and now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to plot a dot for every number. So the number 1 occurs one time, so I'm going to put that 1. So the number 2 occurs one time, so I'm going to put 1 at 2. So then we have the number 6. The number 6 occurs 2 times, so I'm going to put 2 dots and I'm going to stack them on top of each other. All right, then we have the number 7, the number 9, we have 11, so one of those, and then we have 2 12s, and then finally 16. Now, a couple of things to remember that when you're doing a frequency table is the horizontal axis is a number line. All right, so the horizontal axis is going to be our number line. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is how do we look at a frequency table? So a frequency table is very similar to a line plot. It's going to tell us the same information, but instead of plotting actual points, we may have tally marks, or they may just state this is how many occurs. So for the frequency table, it shows the data that is separated into equal intervals. Now, frequency of items in an equal interval is shown with tally marks. And again, sometimes they won't necessarily use the tally mark. Sometimes they'll just say, this is the value, this is how many times it occurs. It kind of just depends. But first thing we're going to do, we have the same set of numbers. We're still going to have a title. Now, the key here is we need equal intervals. So I'm going to highlight that, equal intervals. So that means that we need to make sure that we separate it into equal sections. So we have a range of numbers between 0 to 16. So 16 can be split up multiple ways. We could divide it by 4, we could divide it by 2, we could divide it by 8. It depends on how many ways we want to do it. But I think that 4 would be a good separation because it would give us 4 actual sections to work with. So then we have our tally. And then we're going to talk about the frequency. How often do numbers occur in that interval? All right, so my first interval would be 0 to 4, because if we're going to 16, remember 16 divided by 4 would give me 4 numbers apiece. So then we're going to go 5 to 8. Then we're going to go from 9 to 12. And then we're going to go from 13 to 16. All right, so from here, so we have 0 to 4. How many numbers occur 0 to 4? So we have 1, 2, so 2 tallies. So the frequency here is 2. Then we have 5 to 8, so 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So a frequency is 3. 3 numbers occur between 5 and 8. Then we have 9 and 12. So we have 4 tally marks this time, so the frequency is 4. And then finally, we have 1 tally mark for 16, so the frequency there is 1. Now, a couple of things to remember. Intervals must be equal, okay? So we need to make sure that we divide it out. And for this particular example, we started at 1, so we could have just said from 1 to 4 since we didn't have a 0. All right, and then they should be in chronological order. So when we look at our values, we should not be skipping from 1 to 4, then 9 to 12. So they should be in chronological order, or we could say they should be in sequential order. Okay. All right, so why did we talk about all this? Well, we talked about all this in order to do a histogram. Now, a histogram is not a bar graph. Let me go ahead and say that. A histogram is not a bar graph. So a histogram shows data graphed into those intervals. So we're going to graph our frequency table. So the frequency of an item in an equal interval is shown by the height. So we're going to make the height of the bars show how much often something occurs. So once again, we still have our same set of numbers. So we're still going to have a title. Now the difference here is we're actually going to make our frequency table into a graph. So we did it starting, we went to 4, and then we went to 8, then we went to 12, and then we went to 16. And our frequency doesn't go past, 5 or 4? So we'll just leave it at 5 since we've already got it. So how does it work? So the first thing, so the interval from 1 to 4 was 2 items. So we have a height of 2. Now these are going to be connected. So we're going to start at 4 and then we're going to go from, we're going to go up to 3. And then we have 8 to 4 or 9 to, or excuse me, 8 to 12 or 9 to 12. That's going to be 4. So we're going to go up to 4. And then finally, for the last one, we only have 1 value occurring there. So again, a few things to remember here. The horizontal axis is a number line, just like it was for the line plot. Intervals must be equal. Now, what's the difference between a histogram and a bar graph? Well, a histogram, all of my bars are connected to each other. All the intervals are connected. In a bar graph, you can have values that are separated. So like if you remember with a bar graph, you could do here, here, here. So like these are all connected to each other because they have to have equal intervals. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to do some examples and we're going to talk about how to analyze a histogram. So I have a histogram and it talks about, we have an age group. So we have age of 1 to 10, then 11 to 20. And it tells us the number of people. Now, they obviously didn't give us a reference for this, but we have age group as our interval and we have the number of people as our frequency. So the first question says, what age group has the maximum number of people? Now remember, each bar represents the amount. So for this one, for this interval, we have 15. Then for this interval, we have 25 people. For 21 to 30, we have 35 people. And then for 31 to 40, we have 25 people again. So the problem says which one has the maximum number. So the age group is going to be 21 to 30 has the maximum number. And then it says which age group has the minimum. Well, 1 to 10 has the minimum amount of people in it. What is the frequency? So how often does it occur in 31 to 40? Well, that's 25 people. How many people are there in the age group of 11 to 30? Well, if we look, 11 to 30 is actually 2 bars. So we would have to add 25 and 35 to give me a total of 60 people in that age group. How many people are older than 30? So if we're looking at how many people are older than 30, so we're going to look at 30 and we're going to go older than that. So older than 30 is going to be that 31 to 40 range. So 31 to 40 is 25 people. Now, if it had said how many people are 30 or older, then we would have had to have included this section, because we don't know how many people are 30. There may not be any people at 30, but we would have to assume that 30 or older would have to include both of them. But it didn't say 30 or older. It said older than 30. So older than 30 is going to be just that last interval. How many people are included in this histogram? So how many people total is going to be 15 plus 25 plus 35 plus 25. So we have 100 total people. All right, now the last part, it says what percentage. So I'm going to say that again. What percentage of the people are greater than 10? So greater than 10 means that we're going to do 11 or more. So the section that is 11 or more is going to be 25, 35, and 25. So if we add those up, we get 85 people. Well, in order to find the percentage, we have to do part divided by the whole. So part divided by the whole, there's 85 people in that part of the graph, and there's a total of 100. So we would get 0.85. Well, remember, in order to turn it into a percentage, you would have to multiply it by 100, and it would give me 85%. All right, part B. So very similar. We have, again, we're talking about marks. So I'm assuming that they're calling marks like a score, like a test score or a quiz score, marks. And then this is the number of people that got in, how many got in that mark range. All right, so the number of students that were 26 to 50. So let's kind of go ahead and write these out again. So frequency 10, 20, 70, and 50. All right, so 26 to 50 is going to be 20 students. Then it says how many students got more than 50 marks. So more than 50 is going to be this direction. So that's going to be 70 plus 50 is going to be 120 students. All right, then the next one, which marks range has minimum frequency? So which one is the minimum? So the minimum is going to be 0 to 25 with 10 marks. How many students got 50 or less? So this is where I was talking about just a second ago. So we're not just saying, oh, well, since we're doing less, we're not saying 50 or more. So 50 or less is going to be in that 50 or less range, which is going to be 10 to 20, which is 30 students. Now, if I had said 50 or more, so how many students are in the 50 or more range? So if we said 50 or more, we would have to include the 20 that time, because we don't know how many students got 50, but we'd have to include that range. So it would have to be 20, 70, and 50, which is going to give me 140. So just keep that in mind. All right, so then we have 51 to 75, so that's going to be 70 students. How many students are included in this histogram? So we would total those up. So we have 20, 10, 70, and 50. So that's going to be 30, 30 plus 120. So that's going to be 150 students that are included in this histogram. All right, so what percentage? So again, here's the percentage question. What is the percentage of students that are between 26 and 75? So 26 to 75, okay, is going to include two different sections. 26 to 75 are going to be the 20 plus 70. That's going to be 90 students. So 90 divided by the whole, which is 150. So 90 divided by 150 is going to give me 0.6. But again, we're going to multiply that by 100, and it's going to give me 60% of my population. All right, so remember with a histogram, you're basically talking about frequency in graph form, and you're talking about how often something occurs within that interval.